we have the remarkable Chris Kilham to do our closing keynote address. Chris is well known as the medicine hunter. He's also an author, an educator, and a TV personality who promotes natural plant-based medicines, sustainable trade, and indigenous cultures. He's conducted ethnobotanical research in more than 45 countries and lectures worldwide about holistic wellness and botanical medicines. Chris also has a remarkable new book coming out in January on the harmonious blending of yoga and cannabis called The Lotus and the Bud. I've read it. It's really good. It's really useful. Take it to the mat, take it to the floor, take it to the pipe, information and inspiration. And this is one gentleman who knows whereof he speaks. After 50 years of yoga practice, teaching yoga, working with medicines, et cetera, et cetera. So he's also, as you'll see, one of the best speakers around, in my humble opinion. So please welcome Chris Kilham.
Stephen, thank you so very much. I'm really happy to be here. And this is admittedly a very disorienting time. Usually when I'm up on stage at Spirit Plant Medicine, I get to look out at the faces of people and see people's expressions and what they agree with and what they wonder about, and just kind of feel the energy of the room. And it is a different situation to do without that. At the same time, I really liked what Mark had to say about this, that this is the community that we can develop at this time. This is the opportunity we have. We're in such a remarkable period of time. We have the global pandemic, COVID-19, which is just death stalking people down every street. And as most of you know, in the United States, we are handling this terribly. We've politicized this. We've turned it into some sort of an ideological football. The rancor about this issue could not possibly be higher, even as the deaths escalate. So it's very challenging. We also live in the times of the Me Too movement. We also live in the times of Black Lives Matter. And we have this tremendous proliferation of social media exploding with information and misinformation in equal parts, a sort of an oceanic tsunami of stuff just coming at us at all times. So the stress level is very high. And I believe when I look around and I just kind of suss out the situation, that those of us who are in the psychedelic scene, those of us who have access to these remarkable medicines, especially the plant and fungus-based ones, especially those, we have an opportunity to gain profound insights into not only how to better navigate these times, but also to be, as I really named this talk, Psychedelic Bodhisattvas. And before I get into what a psychedelic bodhisattva is or could be or should be or might be, I do want to tell you a story, because it's a story about connecting deeply with plant medicine, about going into a profound spiritual aware state and being nourished and enlivened and enriched by that experience of the event and the scene, and also of the plant medicine itself. This is back in around January, I think, of 1984, and I was in Kathmandu, Nepal, and I was there for a couple of weeks, and I learned about the Machendranath temple, this old temple made mostly of metal, and that they had holy music there every night. And I went down to the Machendranath temple, and it was this remarkable place in Indrachauk, in the really old part of Kathmandu, very moody statues with all kinds of like chandan shmuts on their foreheads and garlands of flowers and incense everywhere, and lots of people smoking hash and tea being served everywhere, and snacks and tidbits around as I navigated these alleys getting to this temple. And when I got to the temple, I walked in a kind of a long hallway, and there before the main temple building itself, which is this magnificent metal structure, were these guys who were setting up for the evening's music. And you could tell at a glance that they'd grown up with each other. You could tell at a glance that this is something that they had done throughout the entirety of their adult lives together and would do until they passed on one by one. And before they played music, before they sang holy songs, they would get out a Kilham, which, as many of you know, is a conical shaped pipe, in this case, a simple clay pipe. And they would pack it with ganja and they would smoke. And the first time I got there were other people there too, but I could see a couple of them talking to themselves and looking at me, and then they went, "Come on up." So I went up and they invited me to smoke with them. And I don't know why they didn't invite others, but they didn't. And we all got very, very good and high. And then I went back to where I was sitting on a perch right near them, and they started to argue over which holy songs to sing. And once they started to sing, the combination of being in this 800-plus-year-old temple with this magnificent energy that had absorbed into it over the centuries of people worshiping and making pilgrimages there, and the antiquity of these chants, and the amazing, enlivening, tapping in quality of the ganja sent me on a real journey. And a couple of times through the evening, they'd stop and they'd get out the Kilham again, and they go, and I'd go up and I'd smoke with them. And then I'd go back to my little perch, and then they would sing some more, and I would journey out again. And I did this for 9 nights with these men. And I felt an enormous kinship with them. I felt a magic of the time and of the experience. I was absolutely certain I would never see them again. But the deep and profound immersion into spirit made possible by that whole combination of forces really propelled me on to associate psychedelics and profound consciousness altering experiences with dharma, that is, with the spiritual path. Stephen mentioned that I have a book coming up called The Lotus and the Bud, in which I explore cannabis consciousness and yoga practice together, something I have some experience with. And what I can say is that we have access to remarkable agents that can help to integrate us and also help to fashion our purpose in life. Now, I appreciated a lot of what Zoe said before with regard to purpose, how we express ourselves, how we serve. I think that we serve best according to the needs of the times. There is a notion of the Bodhisattva. In one sense, the Bodhisattva, in all caps, is some sort of a divine individual, a Messiah-like character, an illumined avatar who comes to the world and through sheer dint of God power and absolute cosmic purity dispenses so much cosmic energy throughout all of humanity and throughout all living beings that everybody and everything is enlightened. We keep waiting for that one. We'll keep waiting for that one. There's also the idea in Buddhism of taking the Bodhisattva vow, of committing yourself to returning to this cycle of time and karma again and again and again for as long as it takes until all beings are liberated from suffering. And there's the third kind of bodhisattva. There's the everyday bodhisattva. There's the person who gains wisdom and insight from any number of ways, certainly in our case as a community of people who rally around psychedelics, from these agents, from ayahuasca, from iboga, from peyote, from San Pedro, from cannabis, from the mushrooms, from many different things that take us far out and far in. We have the opportunity to tap into core understandings that can direct us in ethical, promising, bright, life-imbuing ways. And that's dharma. The whole idea of having visions is cool. Having visions is great. Having a vision in an ayahuasca ceremony, it would in a totally immersive way, so that everything you experience is all the fullness of that moment. If you find yourself just bathed in love, and you find yourself radiating love and being sort of a fire hose for love in that situation, the question is, what do you do with it afterwards? Does that one experience alone so fundamentally and thoroughly transform us that we just carry on as newly refurbished beings? Or is it the case that conscious integration and conscious reflection and consciously referring to and gaining understanding from the visions that we've had helps to guide us along the way? We're not going to be that singular cosmic being that saves the planet. That's an unrealistic idea. It's something that people have always waited for, and it's something that has never, ever once shown up. There have been many wise, beautiful, high, extraordinary teachers, and some remarkable people who have absolutely changed human history. But really, when you get right down to it, the only global bodhisattva is all of us working together, all of us joining forces, all of us having the consciousness, however long it takes, to gain such insight into the absolute need to end suffering in all forms that we become on a constant basis agents of that. And it doesn't mean that you have to engage in any specific professions or materials. People go down to the Amazon by the truckload. They come back and they say, I'm going to be a healer, and it's really pretty funny, actually, because very few of them say, I'm going to spend the next 12 years doing absolutely everything that it takes to be a credible curandero. And I'm going to devote myself to learning and study and hard work. And I'm going to take this seriously, and I hope at the end I'll be a healer. Nobody says that. And, but people get inspired. People get this idea. And the fact of the matter is, you could go back to the bicycle shop that you work in and be an inspiring, radiant, remarkable exemplar of the integration of the medicine. And people go like, well, like, what's with you? Like, how are you switched on? What's that about? It's not always the specific activity. It may be the needs of the moment. I want to tell you a story about the needs of the moment. I do love to tell stories. I was with a friend in the high desert in Yucca Valley in California. This was back in the late 70s. And we were driving east into Joshua Tree, and it was late at night, and it was a warm summer night, and there was no moon, and it was very, very quiet. And we were really the only car we saw on the road for a while. And then we came upon this most remarkably strange scene. In front of us, we saw on the right-hand side what looked like a large white Ford, the driver's door open, the interior lights on, a body in the middle of the road, and ahead of that car, a smaller car with what looked like two figures in it. Seemed to us at a glance that somebody had stepped out of a car and been run over. That's the way it looked. And we stopped and we got out. And in fact, that was exactly what had happened. There were two women in a Datsun up ahead of the white Ford who were just completely shaken and unable even to speak. And I just said, look, please just stay here. And my friend, Steve, he was driving his car, and I said, please just go back into Yucca Valley and get an ambulance. It looks like we don't have much time here. And so he took off, and there I was with this guy, this old man, in the night, in the dark, in the middle of a desert highway, alone with this guy. Bones are sticking out of him from different directions. He's moaning. I took off my jacket, folded it up, put it under his head, and just sat there with him, for a good long while. And I attended his death. I cradled his head a little bit, and eventually he just plain died. And it was a small service, and it was a momentary service. It was a passing thing. but it was the need of the moment. It was the situation that had arisen. I think that, when you consider what psychedelics can and do show us, we have an opportunity to carry that, to bring that with us inside, in our behavior, in our actions, in our interactions. I travel all over the world, or actually, I used to travel all over the world. For the last 26 years, about 40 to 50% of my I spent on the road. This is the very first time that Zoe and I have ever lived together the whole time. And it's been quite an interesting experience for both of us, because we both love and value our personal and private time, even as we love being with each other. So it's been quite a challenge in that respect, although a good one. But in my travels around the world, I've been very fortunate to meet people in all different cultures. I've been very fortunate to work with people all throughout Africa and Asia, in the South Pacific, in the Middle East, in South America, just all around, on projects that have to do with ethical and sustainable trade of botanicals, and helping to ensure that on the level of the people who are working, cultivating or harvesting some plant, that environmental practices and principles are in place so that that doesn't lead to some sort of environmental devastation. And on the other hand, working to ensure that the people who do the back-breaking labor in this entire field make a decent wage. Right before COVID-19 stopped travel, in February, I came back from Vanuatu, South Pacific, where I had worked with kava over a 25-year period. And if you're familiar with kava, it's a root of a bush that gets pounded into a non-alcoholic drink, and you drink that and it has an immediate relaxing effect. And it's associated with magic and mysticism and ancestral magic in the Pacific Islands, and it's an agent of kinship and community. It's something that people drink every afternoon, that you bring to festivals and celebrations. And it's a central artifact in the culture, especially in Vanuatu, where I've worked since 1995. And it was there on this last trip that I saw something that my friends and I had wanted since decades ago. The people who were growing the kava, the people who were harvesting the kava, the people who were cleaning it and preparing it for drying and shipping, the people who were doing the backbreaking labor were making the best money. And they were supporting their families well, and the nutrition was better, and the schools were better, and they had better clothing. And all in all, their lives were improved in a remarkably almost idyllic tropical island setting, where people are very fortunate to have pure water and sunshine and abundant fish and food growing in the forest. But the important thing was that the people were doing better. And all along the chain of trade, I'll work with people to enhance methods to make sure that processing of things is clean, that the end users get real benefits from the botanicals, whatever they might be. And this is a way that I have found, not only that I love, because I love being with people, but to carry this whole vision, to carry the understanding given to me by both yoga and meditation, and also by psychedelics, forward into my life. To work with people in all cultures, men and women equally. I see terrible disparities in the world. I see up close and personal the inequities that women suffer. I see how skin color and ethnic background make a tremendous difference in how people are treated. One of the things that I do see, I did finish that. One of the things that I do see out there is that when you go in many countries, restaurant, to a bank, to any number of places, even in some cities and shopping malls, if I'm walking to, there will always be two armed security guards. And they'll stop people and they'll ask for papers and they'll ask for itineraries and all kinds of things. They never stop me. And they never stop me because I'm a tall white guy. And that's the only reason. And they stop everybody of color. And I see that all the time, and it's grossly unfair, and it shouldn't be. And I see in cultures where women are really, really oppressed, in places where it's very openly expressed that they do not have and should not have the same rights and privileges as men. I see women who suffer the entirety of their lives, who are diminished in the eyes of the men around them, who are diminished in society, who are diminished in culture. And I believe that it takes, especially at this time, when we have a greater sensitivity to the painful conversations happening in society, to take all of the profound, brilliant, illuminating and instructive visions that we get about oneness and harmony and integration and hope and sending love to all people and all beings, that we actually carry that into our lives, that we pull that forward into our lives. In yoga and in Buddhism, in addition to practices like meditation and asana and breathing and concentration, you also have principles of living, right action, right speech, right thought. And it's not that anybody exterior is trying to control you. It's that we know that certain ways of thinking, certain ways of speaking, certain ways of engaging enhance the life energy within us, enhance our own capacity to embrace inspiration and liveliness and change and goodness in the world, and to give that out. Here's a crazy thing for you. We have an estimated 100 billion neurons in our brains, okay? That's like a lot of neurons. And each neuron has an electrical charge of 0.07 volts, an aggregate of over 7 million volts of electricity at all times. And that's just in our heads. And then for real, this is a real thing. And when you actually add up all of the electricity emitting from all the cells in our bodies at all times, it is tens of millions of volts of energy. It is astonishing. And there are a few people who figure out how to harness that. I've got a friend in Peru, a shaman named Don Alejandro Alfaro. And he lives in Lima, and he's a character, all right. If you met Alejandro, you would think you were meeting somebody going to a country club. He dresses like Tiger Woods, usually has kind of natty sportswear on, a nice clean cap, always never has dirty shoes. This guy never has dirty shoes. And Alejandro, I love introducing people to him. Sometimes I just leave them alone with him. He, as part of his healing work as a shaman deriving from the Shavan tradition, he does a lot of body work on people. And he gives a brutal, just crucifying massage that one writer from Outside Magazine who traveled with us described as having your eyes gouged with a 5-iron. It's truly terrible. And yet everybody who goes to Alejandro, who comes out, goes, I can't believe it, how awful that was. And I can't believe how insanely good I feel. And people who are just going to hang out around this guy come away going, what's with him? I feel so good. His whole thing, his whole service, his whole dharma, his whole way of carrying the medicine, his whole way of moving through the world with the strength and the force of the shamanic wisdom that he's gained from, ancestral magic all through multiple generations, is that he generates energy. He takes some of that tens of millions of volts of personal energy humming through our bodies at all times and consciously puts it out. And people respond. And I haven't met anybody yet that I've taken or that's been around him who hasn't commented on that. Who wasn't, it's usually, it's like in the cowboy movies. Who was that guy? Like the Lone Ranger, you know? And so what I'm suggesting is that not only can we engage in acts, small and large, in pursuits of different kinds, whether it's, you know, the type of activist work that Zoe does with Cosmic Sister, with MAPS, and also with Spirit Plant Medicine, both of whom have made heroic strides in the proper and wonderful representation of women and people of all different backgrounds. It's tremendous to see. But also, we can, in fact, harness our capacity far beyond what we suspect. One time I was up in the Himalayan hills in the town of Ranikhet, a very picturesque place. There's a cantonment up there, an army base, and of course all around it, completely around it, it's just profuse with ganja, because people grow cannabis up there everywhere, and they make the local hashish, charas, out of there. And if you know what charas is, you basically take some buds and you rub those buds in your hands, and then your hands get all sticky and gooey and black, and you rub your fingers and hands together, and you get like little pinners of this goo, and you keep adding it together and adding it together, and eventually you get little balls of it, and eventually you get fingers of it. And that is what they smoke up there. And it's prolific at the Shiva temples, which are abundant in the hills. Everywhere you go, you know, you sit down and a priest will look at you and say, smoking? And if you say yes, you're worshiping Shiva. You're worshiping the god of yoga and cannabis together, who theoretically gave both to humanity at a picturesque temple in the hills. But anyway, I was walking up this very steep road, and I was impressed by a road sign that said, remember, leopards have right of way. And I thought, yeah, you bet they do. In my world, they certainly do. And I got up pretty high on this mountain road to a plaza, to a beautiful temple compound. It was really nicely done with white and pink marble and beautiful decorations. And it was very, very well kept. And this young man, maybe 14, 15 or so, came over to me and said hello. And he looked at me and he said, Maharaji? And I know that Maharaji means great king and is a designation of a spiritual master. I said, yeah, sure. Figuring he meant, are you here to see Maharaji? And the fact is, I had no idea that there was any particular person there. I had simply come upon this temple. But I followed this young man to a small building that sat on top of a kind of a marble plaza, and he brought me inside. And when I walked in the door, I was almost flattened by the energy of this guy. First of all, the man sitting on the floor was about 6'8", had about 7 feet of hair. He had shoulders as broad as a refrigerator. He was humongous. He had eyes that just could burn a hole through bricks, and he didn't talk. He had a little chalkboard, and he'd write something and point to his assistant, and the assistant would say something, and the guy says, you know, where are you from? And I say, I'm from the US. And we kind of went like this a while. At one point he said, you have an election tomorrow. I said, yes. And he wrote something else. This is back when he said, Clinton will win. And, but the thing that was remarkable about this guy was he was a massive generator of energy. It was oceanic. It came off this guy in waves. It was palpable like the hot sun on a summer day. It was palpable like a driving rain. It was palpable like a heavy wind. This guy had force, monstrous, enormous force. And when he would walk out of the temple compound, and I saw him do this a couple of times, and just go down the hill and take a walk for a couple of miles, people would pour out from the neighborhoods and from Maharaji's on the walk, and dogs and kids, and everybody would fall in beside and behind him, and they would walk along in his, basically drafting his energy flow, and happy to be with this great, great, great yogi. And he built a school, and he built health facilities for the community, and he performed a lot of good acts that enhanced the lives of the people there. And at night, he would do this most amazing thing. And the first night it happened, I was a little disoriented and didn't understand for a few minutes. Around 11 o'clock or so at night, this wave of energy would just slowly come down the mountain. I was staying in a place below where his temple was situated. And this massive blanket of energy would just roll over us and cover us. And it seemed to stay and reside and just sit over the entire area for the full night. And then in the morning, just be gone like that. And every night, it was the same thing. This cloak of phenomenal protection, this energy of healing and strength and guidance, and a direct tap into the fundamental current of wisdom as it goes through the yoga tradition, as it goes through the cannabis, as it goes through living life in a certain way that guarantees a more full and radiant expression of inner energy. And admittedly, he was an unusual example. He was putting some of his millions of volts right out there all the time. And it was one of the most astonishing and revelatory experiences I ever had, because I got to see him over the course of a few times, and I got to understand that his tap was always turned on. His faucet was always running. His tub was always overflowing. It was the way it was. And it proved to me beyond the shadow of a doubt that people can harness and rally and focus and radiate energy, pure energy. Now, it would be delusional to imagine that we all can do that, or at least we all can do that without training, that we can all do that without real discipline, because it takes enormous strength to be able to do that kind of thing. But it does not take enormous strength to perform endless acts of goodness and kindness. It does not take enormous strength to remember that the person at the cash register is a human being who may be suffering terribly, and for sure is a first-line person in this world right now today. The demand of COVID-19 is that, as Zoe was describing earlier, and it's true, people are walking around carrying all types of stress and tension and worry and anxiety and desperation. And there's denial on top of that. And then you have crazy, crazy, crazy conspiracy theories. You know, I post information. I post health information on one of my personal Facebook sites, and the site's pretty popular, gets a lot of attention, and I get trolls. I really do. It's the most amazing thing. I'll write, you know, cases of COVID are such and such, and the new research on this particular drug shows these results, and blah, 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 blah. And I'll get called an asshole, a shithead, stupid. I was called a Marxist cockroach the other day. I was told that I was a mouthpiece for the dominator power elite. I mean, I don't even know where these people come from. Thankfully, most of these social media sites allow you to, quote, unfriend and block people. So on occasion, I have to do that. But these are truly weird times. Even when you try to do something good, even when you try to make a positive contribution, still there are people who are so hurt, who are so stressed, who are so alienated, who feel so left out of the dream, whatever the dream is for them, that they can't lash out enough and hard enough and fast enough and with as little grace and dignity and intelligence as sometimes happens. Now, there are people out there who lash out, who are desperate for help. And if they get it, and whatever that form might be, a kindness or something more than that, can respond more freely and warmly. That also happens. All of this is the work of a psychedelic bodhisattva, every bit of it. It's not that you have to say, I'm going to be a healer. It's not that you have to say, from this point forward, I'm going to shave my head like a bhikshu and walk around with a begging bowl and chant and wear orange robes and just radiate Buddha energy. That's not going to happen. That's not the needs of the times. The needs of the times are, if you work in a bakery, you make sure that people, for some reason, just want to be there in your company when you're working there because they get something from it. And maybe they don't even understand it, but they just plain like being around you. Or if it means that you work in some other capacity, maybe you're an accountant, maybe you're a nurse, maybe you're a therapist, maybe you're a gardener, maybe you're a landscaper, maybe you're a tour guide. Whatever you do, no matter where you are, there is an opportunity to carry forth the dharma. And the dharma is the path to realization. The dharma is the path of integration. I've said in previous talks that I heard a wonderful thing from a Hawaiian elder who said, true healing puts into order the body, the mind, and the spirit with the past, the present, and the future. When you think of the global nature of that idea, of that fully integrated body, mind, spirit being, of what is possible, you realize that in the highest sense, the psychedelics are medicines. We can use them well, we can use them poorly, we can use them for fun, we can use them ceremonially. There isn't really a right or wrong to it, but there is always an opportunity to reach high. I've said before, and I mean it, there's nothing at all wrong with an afternoon, a naked frisbee on mushrooms on the beach. I mean, make sure it's a naked beach, but that's fine. That's good. That's healing. That's wonderful. That's restorative. That's refreshing. That's what these things are for, to refresh our souls, to refresh our spirits, to enliven us, to brighten us, to clean the gunk out of our channels, to inspire us. You know, the first time I ever got high, I took 250 micrograms of white lightning LSD, and I had a riotous day. And I learned a lot of things, and I was blown away by how magnificent the whole experience was. There was one point in which I started to laugh while sitting on a bed. And when I was done, 25 minutes later, the bed was completely tipped over, and I had had the best laugh of my entire life. And it was not a solemn ceremonial circumstance. It was not an intentional spiritual pursuit. It was trying this wonderful, amazing thing that other people had told me about. And this was in 1967. And having this experience that so blew the gunk out of my personal channels and so inspired me that it was vivid and it hung in my mind in the most brilliant way for months. It was fabulous. What a great door opener. People say that cannabis and the psychedelics are gateway drugs. And, we deny it. Oh, no, that's not true. When it is true, they are gateways to greater consideration of others, gateways to exploration of ideas and ways of thinking perhaps beyond what we've considered before. For many of my friends, the psychedelics and ganja have been gateways to yoga practice, to regular meditation pursuit, to organic gardening, to a more ardent love of and understanding for and respect of and dedication to the protection of the natural environment, toward decency and human rights. So unquestionably, these are gateway agents. Let's not misrepresent them. They just happen to be brilliant, enlightening gateway agents. And that's the thing about what we have, the gold that we hold in our hands with psychedelics. When I first drank ayahuasca, which I only did for 3 nights in a row the first time. down at the old Espiritu de Anaconda outside of Iquitos. It was an utterly transformative experience that healed me of grief. And it enabled me to rally my energy in a manner that I had not been able to for a good long time, and to summon the full reserves of my mind and my body and my natural vigor and my sense of purpose, and to bring that forward. And from that point on, I started bringing people down to the Amazon, and then eventually Zoe and I started bringing people down to the Amazon so they could have the experience too, so that they could have the experience of profound healing and sometimes profound distress. I mean, ayahuasca, for those of you who've drunk it, it's not necessarily a walk on the beach. You may spend a good part of your night with your face and your hair in a puke bucket. And that's no fun. You may get lost in the toilet vortex. That's no fun. You may have miserable memories of traumas one after another. That's not fun. But there is a point for everybody who goes with the medicine that it does what it is supposed to do, and to help harmonize and integrate body, mind, and spirit with past, present, and future, to create that entire fusion. When we have realizations in ayahuasca, and it's true with mushrooms, it's true with peyote, it's true with San Pedro, it's true with massive oral quantities of psychedelic ganja, you can break through things that have held you back, maybe even for your whole life. Zoe and I sat one time in a circle at a gathering here in Massachusetts and heard a 23-year-old man describe how for the entirety of his life, he felt bad and depressed until somebody one day passed him a joint. And he took a toke of that joint and it changed. Mark Hayden co-authored a paper with his partner, Brigitte, who's a psychiatrist, in which they described 2 incidents of women consuming massively overly huge amounts of LSD. And the young woman, who had had a lifelong battle with severe depression, took something like 10 times the clinical dose of LSD, so 2,500 micrograms. Do not try this at home. Do not say, wow, what a good idea that is. But she did that. And at some point, she wound up in the company of her father, and she was, really, really tripping. And about 6 hours into it, she looked at him and she said, "It's over." And he thought she meant the effects of the LSD were over. And she meant that the disorder that she had suffered for her entire life was gone. And to the best of Mark and Brigitte's authorship, that hasn't returned. We can, in fact, have miraculous experiences with the psychedelics. We can, in fact, open up whole new paths, ways of walking this earth. We can, in fact, be so inspired by the sheer massive open corridors into the spirit world that we gain understanding of things we never even thought to ask about before. My friends and I, back in my early days of drinking ayahuasca, encountered a most remarkable shaman. His name was Don Lucio. And we jokingly would say that Don Lucio looked like Mick Jagger. And he was this very strange guy. Mostly my experience with shamans, and at this point I've known about 65 or so in South America, is that, they spend the majority of their time here, and then in ceremonial circumstances and others, they spend their time in the spirit world, and they're fluid going back and forth. But my friends and I got the sense right from the beginning that Lucio spent much more of his time in the spirit world and dropped in here in the phenomenal world. And he'd come around during the day. He was a very friendly guy when he wasn't in ceremony. Usually had a towel draped over his shoulder. Why? I have no idea. He was quick to smile, but never in front of a camera. If you pointed a camera, he needed to look dour, and I never understood why that was so. I think he thought it was just the demand of the moment, look serious here. But in ceremony, Don Lucio could do something that I never experienced with anybody else. He could, in a moment, just open a gigantic, vast, chasmic pathway to the infinite. You'd just be sitting there and he would sing just a few lines and boom, the spirit world was just an all access backstage pass experience. And that was his gift. That was his training. That was his power. That was his commitment to the medicine. That was his extraordinary talent. He was like the Yo-Yo Ma of ayahuasca, just a remarkable human being. And he could just open up that world and say, come on in, take a look around. Let's go for a journey. And his capacity to carry people way, way, way out with the Icaros, the healing songs, the songs that bring the spirit and power of the plants into our bodies, into our beings, into our souls, into our entire multi-million volt electrical makeup. He could help make that happen. That was his talent. That was his skill. That was how he carried the medicine. He just delivered you into the spirit world and said, eat up and soak up all the healing you possibly can. Have all the ecstatic Lucio, as much as any shaman, and more than almost all of them, really taught me the profound transformative power of the medicine. And I still say that the best use we can possibly make of these insights and of this healing is to make sure that we integrate all of that into our behavior, that we carry it forward. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's going to be. Not one of us on this conference is an enlightened being, and we're not likely to be anytime soon. And that's okay. We're not striving for perfection. We're striving for health and harmony, for a more dignified life for all people, a better life for all sentient beings, a more whole and healthy planet, a more inspired way of moving through this very, very brief experience we have. One of the books that I like a lot is called Tibetan Yoga and the Secret Doctrines by T. Evans Wentz and Lama Kazi Dawa Samdap from a long time ago, from the early 1900s. And there's a line in there that says, this will all seem like a flash of lightning on a summer's day. No matter how long our lives, no matter what we experience, no matter what paths we tread, no matter how many airplane trips we take, how many people we know, how many conversations we engage in, how many pursuits we, chase, whatever, it will all seem to go in a flash. So the question is, how do we deal with this flash? How do we deal with this brilliant, but really fundamentally brief moment of illumination? How do we take the healing and transformative powers of the psychedelics, of the plant and fungi, the plants that serve us by delivering us healing, by helping us to gain insight and wisdom? How do we take that and carry forward in this magnificent and potentially very exuberant burst of life? How do we do that? And my proposition is we do it as psychedelic bodhisattvas. We dedicate ourselves to serving in as many situations as we can. I come from the Boston area. I grew up flipping the bird to other drivers, cutting them off in traffic. I mean, it's the sport of the locale. If you don't do that, you actually die on the streets. I mean, it's like Gladiator out there. And, I had to unlearn that. I had to learn to be like a more generous hearted person and go, yeah, go ahead, take the turn. That makes sense. And Zoe complains that I don't necessarily do that enough, but it can be in all of our actions, big and small. It can be that you decide to dedicate yourself as an attorney to championing the rights of oppressed Indigenous people and to work in dangerous situations where, the oppressors want all of you dead because it's inconvenient that you live. That's a high calling. That can be a psychedelic inspiration. But also just plain being nice to the people around you all the time because everybody is suffering. That's a way of living as a psychedelic bodhisattva. The idea that some people get in the psychedelic experience of being the chosen one is utterly delusional. Some people come away from an ayahuasca experience, from a peyote experience, from an LSD experience, from an iboga experience, from a something experience, imagining themselves to be the one that's going to settle the matter. And first of all, that's an unbearable and crushing spiritual burden, which nobody should try to take on because it's unrealistic and unachievable. But also, that is delusion. Anytime we imagine ourselves to be greater beings or somehow more magnificent than others, that is the surest sign that we have lost our way. Because if we're really going to be harmonized as human beings, if we're going to be harmonized global citizens, if we're going to respect and love and honor and cherish the earth, if we're going to be the ardent supporters and stewards of nature, if we're going to carry good, high values forward that enhance the lives of all sentient beings, then we must, at our core, be decent and fundamentally tapped into the goodness of life. The psychedelics help us to do that. They give us insight. They open up new ways of understanding for us. And as you know, if we're together with others and we share the experience, they're also profoundly unifying among participants. I have great love and respect and appreciation for the many, many people that I've brought down or that Zoe and I have brought down to the Amazon on different trips for the purposes of people experiencing ayahuasca. And I've also sat in endless circles of friends and groups, large and small, going back to 1967, smoking cannabis or eating cannabis confections and sharing and having a moment that's saturated with convivial goodness. You don't have to do psychedelics. You don't have to utilize cannabis to be a good, decent person. There are good, decent people all around us. But I will say this, that these agents provide us with wisdom and insight and guidance, which if we take it up, can make our lives and the lives of other people and the health and the well-being of the planet going forward much, much better and much, much more beautiful. Thank you very much for being here with me tonight, and bless you all.
Okay. All right, Chris, wonderful.
Fantastic, like always.
Yes, Chris, that was truly delightful, wonderful. You're a great storyteller and such a positive message. I love your optimism, Chris, your vision. And I would also like to say that you are medicine. You're good medicine, my friend. You are good medicine. You're not just a medicine.
Oh, bless you, man. Yeah. Bless you guys.
That's
You're doing heroic,
thing.
Terrific work with this.
You just drop off the word hunter and call yourself Chris Kilham, medicine.
And Chris, I just want to thank both you and Zoe for your support over the years. In the time that I've been here, you guys have just always been a pillar of this conference, and I'm just really grateful for what both you and Zoe bring to our community, to the medicine community at large, and really the influence you have in transforming humanity. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And
Well, thank you for that. And I do want to say that this conference is one of our very most favorite things. You know, we really do actually plan our fall around spirit plant medicine. You know, well, it's the conversation usually by about March is, so like what are we going to organize? Are we going to do some bumper days on the front and back of this? Who are we going to see? And the community we love. So for the opportunity to participate in this way is really spectacular for us. And we've greatly enjoyed the conversations and the meetings that we've had with the wonderful people who show up for it. So thank you guys very much.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you.